Hello, I'm past District Governor Mike Voss, and I've been involved with the Minnesota Lions Hearing Foundation since 2007, and it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Dr. Bevan Yueh is a professor and a George L. Adams Chair for Otolaryngology at the University of Minnesota. He is a native of Minnesota and was delighted to return to Minnesota in 2007. Dr. Yueh is a head and neck surgeon, and his practice is focused on the ablation of head and neck tumors. As a former Robert Wood Johnson clinical scholar, he has expertise in clinical epidemiology and health services research, with a special focus on improving hearing health and improving function and quality of life for patients after treatment for head and neck cancer. Dr. Yueh is a member of the Ambassador Lions Club and is a Melvin Jones Fellow. I am pleased to present Dr. Lion Bevan Yueh.
Good morning or afternoon. It's good to see all of you, although I can't really see all of you. I miss seeing you. But thank you very much for inviting me to come to the convention. I wish I could be there in person. But I guess this will have to do in this very funny year. So I'm Bevan Yueh. I'm the chair of the Department of Otolaryngology at the University of Minnesota, and recently I've become the CEO for University of Minnesota Physicians. And I know many of you, and I wish that I could see you in person so that we could be talking and shaking hands and even hugging, but I guess we'll have to wait till next year for that. Dave and Mike and others have asked me to speak a little bit about some of the work that we've done with the Lions, and many of you are very familiar with that, starting with the work we've done in the past to leading up to where we are today. And I know a lot of you are looking forward either to an update on my wife's chickens or more likely the science that we're covering here. And so I'll skip the chickens today and just talk about the science. But people also want to know a little bit about my thoughts for COVID, so I thought I'd share those. So here's a picture of COVID. It's been a pretty rough year. I know for all of us it's been tough. It's been tough because it's disrupted us. I think too many of you and your friends and your family have lost their jobs. Many of you have been ill, and unfortunately many of your friends have died, and hopefully not your loved ones as well. It's been tough for me too. I think all of you know that I was sick with COVID quite early, and as I was thinking about this, it brought back a lot of memories that I had about COVID. So I thought what I'd do is just take you through a few slides. I think this is what you all know now. This is the current map. This is dated a couple of days ago of COVID prevalence. All of you know that we've had over 500,000 people in the United States pass away from COVID, and you can see it's all over the world here. Let me take you back. Let me take you back to about a year ago. And I don't remember if you remember this, but this was how it was in January of 2020. We at the University of Minnesota were just becoming aware of COVID. We, being an academic institution, have networks all across the world. We had folks in China, and then when the first case came to Seattle, friends in Seattle who were telling us how to treat this. So about 14 months ago, we were really busy. We were busy trying to figure out what our treatment protocols would be. We were, in particular here, standing up to one of the first COVID-only hospitals in the country to take care of people. What happened though in March was around this time last year that I was working real hard. I had started taking over the CEO role. I was feeling tired all the time, and I thought, you know what, it's just because I'm working super hard as a CEO as well as all the other work that I was doing. One night when I felt like I was having a little fever, I thought, oh, you know what, I'm just tired. I just need to get a good night's sleep. I started getting a cough the next day, and I said, oh man, I forgot my asthma medications. But then the following day I woke up and I went to brush my teeth, and I couldn't taste a toothbrush. And as an otolaryngologist, you know that when you can't taste, you're probably not able to smell, and that's exactly what happened. I couldn't smell anything. I was tired, but I was determined to keep working, but I checked my temperature and I was 102 degrees. At that point, I knew that I was sick and I had COVID. And so I did what any normal doctor would do, just get down, get on Zoom and keep working. And I thought I was doing fine. I was going through 12 hours of Zoom calls, doing just fine, I thought. But what happened was many of my colleagues on the calls happened to my wife. All of you who know me know my wife, and you know that she's not going to be somebody who puts up with a lot of nonsense. And they started calling her and telling her that I wasn't able to finish my sentences, that I didn't look right. One friend, I would say, kind of a friend, really betrayed me because he sent over a oxygen monitor to my wife and I told her to put it on my finger. And I said, why did you do that? He says, because I'm really worried about you. I said, well, why'd you tell my wife? And he just laughed. He says, because I know you wouldn't do it. So my wife got the oxygen monitor. She brought it into my room. And when you measure your blood oxygen, you should really be at 95, 94. When you get to 93%, that's not very good. And I put it on my finger. I was 87%. And I remember very clearly, my wife said, what does 87% mean? And I looked at her and I said, it's actually pretty good because that's a B+. And somehow she knew I was lying. And so that night, or that day, immediately she brought me into the emergency room. The emergency room physician, who was a friend of mine, I told him, I'm fine, just let me get a night's sleep. And so he says, nope, you're going to the hospital that you guys just stood up. So I got admitted to Bethesda Hospital, this hospital right here, which had just opened that week for COVID patients, and I got really sick. I got sick and I realized that this was even more serious than I thought. I was blessed. I never had to be intubated. I stayed in the hospital for 11 days, and after the 11 days were out, I gradually recovered. And I want to tell you, I'm definitely one of the lucky ones. I have no long-term symptoms. I feel great. I've been back at work really since the beginning of May of last year and had not a missed beat, but it really taught me how serious it was. And those of you who've become ill, those of you who've seen people who've become ill, you know what I'm talking about. Dave Dominic, I know you're just recovering from it, and I hope you're continuing to do well. But many of you asked, so I just want to assure you I'm doing great. Thanks to all of you for your well wishes, and I hope that all of you are recovering and getting vaccinated by the time this video is shown. And hopefully by the time this video is shown is in May, we'll be in a different part of the system, in the disease cycle. Hopefully you'll all have been vaccinated, and we'll be looking forward to a great summer in Minnesota. I thought what I do today, I usually don't present with slides, as you guys know, but I thought it was a good time to just sit down after a year away and think about what we've been through. And I wanted to talk about the partnership that we have with the Lions. It's been an amazing partnership, and I did a little research. I don't know how many of you know, but we started in 1972 when Lions Club International actually adopted hearing and worked with the deaf as a major project for Lionism. And in 1973, the Multiple Here in Minnesota had its convention in Duluth and established the Lions Hearing Foundation. And the first board of trustees was sat with 2 representatives from every district. And in 1973, with, I believe it was Dr. Paparella at that time, the Lions decided to create a formal partnership with the Department of Otolarygology. So we are now coming up on almost 40 years of partnership, which is pretty cool. Those of you who have used to participate in our tours, have seen our 8th floor. You guys know that beautiful space was created with the Lions with a $1.6 million project, which is a lot of money now, even more money in 1973. In 1985, the construction was completed, so we had patient care up there, research labs, educational space, offices, and we continue to be there. And those of you who come see, we're still taking great care of the space, and we're so grateful that the Lions helped us establish our department. In 1989, the Lions came through with a huge donation for more research equipment in audiology, speech, psychoacoustics. It's been a phenomenal partnership. In 1993, those of you who've come by the campus have also seen that gorgeous building next to where the football stadium is, the Lions Research Building. That was built, and we still have a lot of our wet labs over there. We have neurosurgery, neurology, ENT, and ophthalmology over there, and there's a picture of it. A big program, for those of you who are too young to remember, was newborn hearing screening. In the late 90s, people started saying that we should be screening every single child born in a hospital to be screened for hearing loss. And that was a great idea. We all thought that's great, but there was a little problem. the government forgot to provide money for us. So how are we going to hire people? How are we going to get the equipment to do that testing? So most of the states in the country were stuck. There was one state that stepped ahead, and it was Minnesota. And it was because of the lines. And so what the lines did was work with every single hospital in the state to say, if you send your patients down here, we'll give you the supplies that you need to do the testing. And within 6 years, every single kid in the state of Minnesota was tested for hearing loss, and all 111 hospitals at that time began to participate. That was a monumental effort, if you think about it. No other state in the union was able to do that. We did it in Minnesota because of the lines, and because of that, we now find 200, 250 kids that are completely deaf every year who otherwise would not have had their deafness diagnosed. And as a result, we're able to give them cochlear implants and get them into mainstream society. It's huge what the lines have done. The lines have done other things for kids. This work started after I came back to Minnesota in 2007. We worked together to build to have the Hearing Foundation establish the Lions Children's Hearing Center, so that the folks who drive down from, Duluth or drive in from Fargo don't have to come back and forth for so many visits. We created a clinic and a clinic structure so that parents could bring their kids down and see like 6, 7 specialists in one day. That was a huge advantage for our patients, and they were very grateful for that. In 2011, the Lions built out our brand new, I still think of it as brand new, the Children's and Hearing ENT clinic over on the West Bank. And that is the first clinic that we've had that's been completely dedicated to the kids. Those of you who are on the Vision Foundation know that the Lions Vision Clinic is 1 floor above us, so it's a really nice unit for everybody. And in 2020, we just finished expanding the clinic. The Lions paid for an expansion with pediatric sound booths and additional clinic space, so we're very grateful again for that. Let me talk a little bit about science. Why is science important? I think all of you who are living through the pandemic understand that it's science that's bringing us out of this pandemic. Never in the history of mankind has a vaccine been developed for a brand new pathogen so quickly. If you think about it, we discovered this disease last year. We're already beginning to immunize, and hopefully within another 3 to 4 months we'll be fully immunized. From start of the discovery of the virus to the creation of the vaccine to the testing to the full implementation of a virus in 18 months, that's pretty incredible. I don't think we've ever done that before. All these previous vaccines for the diseases took decades. The flu vaccine, which comes out every year, is a known pathogen. They just tweak it a little bit. But a brand new disease and a brand new vaccine, that's on the shoulders of some scientific giants who have done this work. Science is critical, and you guys know that. 40 years ago, somebody stuck an electrode in somebody's ear and jolted the electrode and probably caused a lot of pain to that poor patient. But that electrical signal produced a sound in somebody's cochlea who was deaf. They heard a sound that they hadn't heard in years, and now 40 years later, implants are a multi-billion-dollar industry that has saved so many people from hearing loss. So science is really important, not because of what we can do immediately, but because of what we can do in the future for people. So I was super proud that the Lions in 2011 decided to make a pledge to fund an endowment that would create a Lions Professor of Hearing. And that started in 2011. Over 10 years, we started the Defeat Hearing Loss walks every year with Marlene Martinek's leadership. And that's happened every year except for last year because of COVID. And I'm so proud to say that in a couple of months, we will be formally endowing the professorship. This professorship will be given to Hubert Lim, who many of you know. He's a dynamic, exciting, wonderful bioengineer with great ideas. And I think you're going to be very proud to have him as the first holder of the Lions Professor of Otology and Hearing. He, as a result of his work, every time he's quoted in a paper, it will be Dr. Lim, Lions Professor of Hearing. You'll have that publicity in every talk, every grant, every paper he writes, every time he's quoted in a newspaper. And so what it means is that we will be able to permanently memorialize the Lions' dedication to hearing loss, not only with bricks and mortars, but also with this kind of recognition. You probably all know the Hubert Lynn tinnitus story. Let me just take a moment and tell you about the tinnitus story, because this, I think, gives you great insight into what Hubert is like and what the potential at the University of Minnesota is with the Lions partnership. So those of you who know this story, I know you like hearing it, so I'll tell it again, but for those of you who don't, I'll remind you. So it was about 8 years ago when Hubert, maybe 7 years ago, I'm losing track of the time, but it felt like a long time ago. Hubert came to me in my office and he said, you know, Bevan, I think I have an idea on how to treat tinnitus. And for those of you who don't know what tinnitus is, it's that annoying, high-pitched ringing that you just can't get rid of. And it gets worse as you lose hearing. It gets worse as you age. And it's just, for some people, completely disabling. And what he said to me was, I think I can come up with a patch that you put on the skin that will make people not hear the tinnitus. He says it's going to be like a little bit like a TENS unit. And the TENS unit, for those of you who don't know, is a patch that you can put on the skin to block out back pain or to block out leg pain. And it works really well because it distracts the brain from the pain. And I said to Hubert, I said, that's a great idea, but Hubert, that really won't work because we don't feel like there's a area of your skin that will project to the part of the brain that processes the hearing signals like you would have that would need to suppress the tinnitus. And he says, I know that's a little bit of a problem, but I want to try it. And I said, well, go ahead and try it, write some grants. And he says, I have. Nobody will fund it because it's too crazy of an idea. And I said, well, it is crazy because it won't work. And he said, yeah, but I just want to try it. Can you find some money for me? And it was around that time that I was getting ready to meet with the Lions for our annual request for scientific projects. And I put it in, and the Lions said, yeah, that sounds crazy, but let's try it. So we gave him $10,000, and he took the $10,000, went to his lab, and about 6 months later he came back and showed me something. And what he had done was inject particles in behind the ear of a chinchilla and just saw what happened to the particles that he injected in the skin. And what was amazing was that later on when he looked at the brain of that chinchilla, those particles were actually in the part of the brain that processes sound. And I looked at that, and he looked at me, and I said, Hubert, this is an incredible discovery. This means that somehow you can modulate the skin to influence how your brain thinks about sound. He says, I know. He had a big grin on his face. And I said, well, you got to take the next step. And he says, I know. And he holds his hand out and he says, give me some more money. I said, what do we do? He says, well, they still think it's too crazy to fund at the NIH. So I went back to the Lions and I said, Lions, this is amazing. This is really a cool thing. And they said, well, we don't understand what you're talking about, but if you think it's a good idea, go for it. So they gave us another $10,000 and we gave it to Hubert, and Hubert started putting electrical signals on that part of the ear of the chinchilla, and he found that he could actually change the brain waves where the rabbit or where the chinchilla processes sound. And we realized that we were onto something. And so Hubert then very rapidly now published the data, and guess what? Man, everybody was interested. NIH gave him money. I think the Department of Defense gave him money. A company wanted to start things. And pretty soon, within about 2 years, he developed a prototype. It wasn't on the ear anymore. It wasn't chinchilla. It was human beings. He was testing it on skin, on the tongue, on different parts of the body. And he needed some volunteers. And I said, I know exactly where to go. I called the Lions. They produced like 10 volunteers immediately. We got the data, and it has been like this ever since. The company has been formed. Hubert just finished the trial. We had to run it in Europe because of regulatory reasons. And they have this device now that you put on. There's a stimulator for the tongue, and it works. It cuts down tinnitus. He just published this information. It's attracting a lot of attention all over the world. And it all started with the Lions, with the $10,000 fund. That is the power of the partnership. That's the power of what we're doing. And as we continue to work on this to bring it to the States and to bring it into commercial use, we are definitely going to introduce it here in Minnesota, and we're going to definitely let the people who have tinnitus come and try it with us, because I think this is very powerful. So I'm thinking in about 2-3 years, we're really going to have something here that nobody else has had in the world. And you've probably heard a little bit of publicity recently from the death of a very prominent business person who has tinnitus, who is also now stepping up with major funding for this project. So that's an example of the stuff that we do. A lot of you also want to know about the hair cells that I talk about a lot. And this is Peter Santee's work. Peter's an amazing scientist in our group. You all know about, some of you know about this project. We've been trying to grow hair cells in the lab since 40 years ago when they discovered that birds could regenerate their hair cells. And these are the little hair cells in your inner ear that wiggle when sound passes so you can hear, not the other hair cells that you guys tease me about. But the hair cells in the ear that fall off can be regrown in birds, and people have said, well, why can't we do that in humans? We've been trying to do that work for 40 years in multiple labs all across the states, all across the world. Nobody's been able to figure out how to regrow hair cells. Here's a picture of a normal cochlea, and you probably won't be able to zoom in here, but maybe you can process it later to show people. This is a normal cochlea. You can see all the little hair cells here on the organ of Corti that are functional. Here's an example of a ear. This is unfortunately black and white, but even if it was the same color, you could see that there are no hair cells. So this is somebody who can't hear because they've lost all their hair cells. So what Peter did was he said, I wonder if we can grow human hair cells in animals without hair cells. And his idea was, could we potentially grow hair cells into an animal, let them grow, and then harvest the hair cells to be put into a human being later? Now, this is very, very preliminary work as well, and he just started these experiments, but what he did was find a bunch of, there's a strain of mice that can't make hair cells. And what we have done now is take these mice blastocysts. The blastocysts are that structure that the egg and the sperm form to start to become a baby mouse or a baby human. In about 1 to 2 weeks after fertilization, they begin to form a clump of cells. And what Peter's lab has done is to take the proteins that make human hair cells and inject it into that blastocyst. And he puts a little color in with those proteins, a green fluorescent color, so you can see what happens. And the hope was that because this blastocyst, this mouse doesn't have hair cells, it would sort of say, hey, I got hair cells here. I'm going to absorb them and see what happens with them. So we just finished our first set of experiments. Guess what we got? This is a cut of the cochlea in this mouse that doesn't have hair cells, can't make cells. And look at all these green cells. They're in there, which tells us, this is very, very early. This is like what I told you about Hubert's project 5 years ago. We don't know where this is going to go, but this is the first time we've been able to see that we could potentially grow human hair cells in another animal that will then allow us to harvest them for the human. So this is another project the line started about 4 years ago, and it's really going well too. So anyway, I hope that you guys know about that. You should know about all the other projects we have going on. We have another one where we're directly stimulating the auditory nerve in the brain. We think that will produce even better sound for people. Hubert Lim has also come up with an idea to use ultrasound to produce a new hearing aid, which he thinks is a lot better because he thinks he can use the fluid that encases the brain to process the sound and produce an amazing new hearing technology. So we're at it. I think that Hubert will be a very, very wonderful holder of the First Lines Professor of Hearing, and I think he will do you proud. He will represent us well. I am tremendously grateful to all of you for your support. I wish I could be there in person. I look forward to the day that we can. You guys know that I love visiting you, and I hope that you'll come and visit us when it's safe again to do so. Thanks very, very much, and best wishes to you for a successful convention. Thank you.